Hi, my name's Kay. I'm an Austrian designer and researcher. And on behalf also of my co-author, Chris, I will be presenting today the shape of social media towards addressing aesthetic design power. And I'll get to why aesthetic is parenthesized in a second. But first, I want to very quickly explain our motivations. So this all began because I read a paper on the addictive features of social media a couple of years ago. I was fascinated by the connection between gambling machines and the mechanism of refreshing a page. So you can see here some screenshots that I took of the loading animations of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok when I read that. And we thought we would for sure find academic research where, the effects that social media have are connected to specific design features, because this is also often discussed in public spheres and in design practitioner communities. But there was not a lot, which is weird, because every field that has to do with design has discussions about what essentially with an umbrella term could be called design power. So you've got dark patterns in UX UI, you've got persuasive design and nudge in technology design more broadly, you've got hostile architecture in architecture, and you've got, well, essentially advertising really just is design power, obviously, as a field. So these are all very well-defined field-specific ways to speak about the power that design can have. And they include the whole of design, right? The duality of form and function, although some tend to focus more on one or the other. So we're going to use this umbrella term of design power for all of them as a purposefully vague term meant to make it easier to discuss design power across disciplines. Because design in itself is such a vague term. Like when I was taught design in German, design as an Anglicism often lean more towards the formal and aesthetic side, right? So hailing from this and from a visual design background, the focus on function when we're talking about design and technology obviously irks me, especially since commercially, like with dark patterns, aesthetics are in fact an important focus. For instance, Facebook has reported on their own A/B testing, and if you're a business, they allow you to A/B test your ads to see which one works better, right? So there's also plenty of discussions about how the alt-right uses memes and aesthetics, and all these discussions highlight the power formal design can have. So our aim is to kind of highlight for HCI research on social media what everyone else is already discussing, that aesthetics have power and that the form things take makes a difference. And of course, you can't and probably shouldn't separate form from the functions because they are a duality. But just for the purpose of gaining some ground where it's disregarded, we will do just that for a bit. So we're going to try and explore the aesthetic design power of social media now. So to do this, we collected some screenshots from popular commercial social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and using rules of thumb like contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity, and the concept of negative space. Basically, I went off to essentially critique their design in an iterative process of looking, comparing, taking notes, coming back, discussing it, coming up with some interesting trends, going back to check, and so on. So here's some stuff we found that we thought was interesting and some questions we had that we think need answering. So first off, these social media behemoths are looking more and more the same, right? So none of them allow for any theme customization, and they all have this trendy, white, techie, minimal aesthetic look, and it serves to draw the eye to the content, which is as prominent as possible. Like the newest app and the newest features actually got rid of negative space entirely, but I'll get to that again later. So they all use the same language, right? And with this language, one of the things they're saying is, look at the ephemeral. So within the low key and monochrome backgrounded space around the content, right, this virtual space, the few instances in which contrast is used really stand out. So all of these apps are visually saying, look at this live content, quick, now, you might miss it. Look, there's actually 1.1K people watching it right now. You wouldn't want to be left behind, would you? So like these are aesthetic choices, right? That can have power. They influence us. And on Instagram, it's like, look at this story by someone you follow. It's only there for 24 hours. Look at the green story, which indicates that it's shared only with close friends. That means it's just for you, and you're special. Which brings me to the next big shared focus, green for social presence. So research shows that even the perception of a social space has an influence on our behavior and feelings. And we are constantly reminded of the social context on these platforms. Equally important, but usually highlighted with red, on the other hand, is any sort of social feedback. And in our sort of cultural circle, that's an alarming kind of color, right? It's intense red. And also intense is the heart symbol, which used to signify, more intimate kind of feelings, but has kind of developed into this less deep, more complex meaning. This is a whole other topic, right? Bottom line, the social context is highlighted and socio-emotional triggers are made to stand out as much as possible. They're also, often animated. And one of the most interesting things to us that we discussed a lot was how, first of all, public feedback tends to be more mediated than feedback in private conversations. So you often can only react with a heart and nothing else. But even within private contexts or when offered the choice, this is always limited to 7 to 8 emoji. And I don't know about you, but that does not describe the range of feelings I'm capable of. And this is clearly limiting aesthetic design choice. Like you could just as well let people choose their own emoji themselves, but there is some sort of reason you aren't, right? Whom and what does this limitation serve? Why is this happening? And what's also always really interesting is to see when design principles are kind of used in reverse, like to hide. So not only does advertisement look exactly like other content on these platforms, the label, first of all, they never use that word. It's always sponsored, promoted, or paid partnership, right? And second, it's always squeezed in and grayed out with all the metadata. So they aren't saying, whoa, just want to make sure this is an ad. They are doing the opposite. They're actively trying to pass off ads for regular user-created content. Another thing that you may be noticing on this slide that I've pointed out already is TikTok's landing page and content screens, like their main public spaces, so to say, differ significantly from the other platforms. So this was also something that really stood out and was really interesting to us because TikTok is the youngest app and has the youngest user base. It's arguably the most immersive of them all. So we wonder what kind of difference this heads-up display might make. There's research showing social media can be addictive and that they make you dissociate, that there's pressure to perform and fear to miss out. So it would be interesting to find out how does the aesthetic, the surface of this all impact these effects? Does this more immersive interface promote that kind of stuff? Does it draw you in more? Do you feel more like you're in it? And I need to stress these are all critical speculation, right? So they're drawn from subjective understanding of design language. And they're all, you may have noticed, questions and not answers. But there are some indicators to support some of these things. For instance, in regards to our speculation that more immersive and ephemeral content is preferred, Instagram have stated they will prioritize video, and both they, TikTok, and Facebook have recently introduced live videos. So, that begs the question, are all of these aesthetic choices purely economic choices, or what other reasons are there behind these choices, right? So is constantly seeing the same emoji influencing our emotional reaction to content? Who gets to choose these emoji? Why were they chosen? What reasons are there for not allowing users to choose our own emoji or, create custom emoji? But what's arguably more important than knowing the reasons behind design choices is examining what effects these choices have on us. So this means we have a lot of questions, because the way things look or feel or sound can make it impossible or require higher effort to use a design artifact a certain way. But we don't know to what extent this look or feel or sound plays a role in this. And we do know the harms of social media disproportionately impact those who are already vulnerable, such as people experiencing mental health issues. And we don't know how aesthetic design might differently impact groups like children, the elderly, people with learning disabilities, neurodivergent people, or even just newer and less social media literate users. And I don't have time to go into it here, but there are several examples from academic and design research, as well as non-commercial alternative platforms, that prove that changes to functional as well as formal design can have an impact on reducing these harms of social media. So I think in looking towards, what kind of social media do we want, we need to acknowledge the power of aesthetic design and maybe talk about regulating it. This disregard for aesthetics is kind of tiring, because just because they're simple and intuitive to understand doesn't mean they can't have a really powerful effect. So we hope we've kind of managed to provide a bit of an impulse in that direction here into addressing these matters and acknowledging the importance of aesthetic design. So thank you for listening to our video, and we're hoping to be seeing more discussions around this topic in the future.